Hey, and welcome to my summary of day 5 learning Rome render. And after a very frustrating day of trying to solve the impossible, I finally got to a very cool solution. So let me show you how my table works. So if this is header 1, and this is then row 1, and this is row 2, and then this is header 2, and this is an empty row, and this is row 2, and this is going to be row 3, for example. And you can see I can create and edit a table dynamically, and if I clear the contents of the table, then it gives me a hint of how I should be filling the table. But before we get there, let me just walk you through some of the learnings and things I did today. So first of all, I found over the last couple of days that Rome is a bit funny with how namespaces operate or how it loads different code blocks. So where I got to in the end is every day, every piece of code I place in a different namespace, and this is the naming convention I decided. So it's learned closure, and then day 5, and this would be my first example during the day. It would be good, and I talked about that yesterday, if I could load maybe a common functions namespace and then wouldn't need to repeat common functions all the time. That doesn't work, so for the time being I'm going to stick with a single code block for a component, and having the component its own namespace. Otherwise functions with the same name will compete with each other if they have different versions, and that's going to cause confusion. And also, if I want to do common functions, then I'm going to be using JavaScript for the time being, which reminds me that at one of the next days I need to try to call some Rome42 functions as well. So yesterday's problem, and I'll get into that in a bit more detail, has to do with global variables and immutable states. If you're interested in what yesterday's problem was, it was simply demonstrated in this example. When I have this piece of code that just updates as I update my table, but then when I copy this piece of code like this and I copy it into a separate block, then what you will see is these two change together. So it is actually not a separated state for the two fields, and this means that one component can be used only once, which is not really practical. So I was trying to solve that today, and I'll get into a bit of detail how I tried to solve it, but I wasn't successful. So I got some helpful feedback from Stian about naming conventions, which led me to reading this article. I have to say that I will need to reread it a couple of times, but I got the gist of it. This is a closure style guide, and I highly recommend reading this. This just takes you through a full styling set of guidelines, and it is quite helpful, and hopefully will result in nicer looking code. So I did that. I also found something on Stack Overflow, a bit of a high-level summary of naming convention for functions and variables, and naming convention also for namespaces, etc. So that was one piece. And then what I did first, I looked to fix yesterday's problem, and I just stuck with the element ID solution. So what I also found as I was reading this is this article, this one right here, which provides this table of or flowchart of when to use vars, atoms, agents, and refs. My disappointment when I was looking at this was that all of these are global for every thread, which means that if I create a component, then every thread will share these values, which is a problem in my case. So, and I couldn't find a way around it. I did all sorts of stuff, and let me just show you a couple of things I did. So this is my, and you can see it changes together. So this is one of my attempts, and what I did, apart from renaming the functions so they look nicer and try to follow the styling guide, what I did is I tried to create some sort of a semaphore system to check if the anchor has a value or not, and then update it based on that. I even created this very obscure setup where I started to create a map of block IDs and anchors, hoping that each time I run the component it will run this anchor only once, and then I get this table of anchors and block IDs across the various instances of my component. It doesn't work, and so I get it, because every time this reagent component runs, it will actually update this variable, and as a result it will just continue running. And also these are going to be common, the same value across all of the instances of this component. At least that is what I found. So you can see that in this case it evaluates to the same block ID, which obviously is the block ID only for only one of them. I'm guessing it might be the block ID for the first one. Yes, it is. So that's the thing. In the meantime, you can see here I had some coding problems. Frankly, I ran into again the same issue that Stian pointed out, but with sort by. I ran into that issue with the get function. I was just mixing up the order of the parameters and getting errors. I'm happy that now I was able to figure that out on my own. And then I went on and looked at this example from the Rome help database, and this is again something that Stian showed me. This is a piece of code that does almost exactly what I need. So it updates this table up here based on the children of this node, and then I can add and change, and it will update here. The way it works, and this is what I learned, is for my function I can actually capture the block ID. So the block ID is a state of the specific block where I'm running my code, and then from then on I can use that block ID in my logic. So first of all, here's my working solution for the element ID, and you can see this previously very long solution. Well, the end solution is embarrassingly short. So this is the end solution, and what I do is I capture this variable on the input, and then I print it, and here you go. So I can get the block ID of this block, and if I take this and copy this to the next one, then voila, I get the block ID of the next one as well. So with this I'm extremely happy. And then this takes me to my new solution of the table, which has also gotten shorter because I could take out my random string anchor and all that timer functionality and all of that, which was good learning, but very obscure and not reliable. So what is left is this set of functions that takes the query result and formats it into an array that I can then easily print. And then here my function reads, I take the block ID on the input, I then run my query with the block ID as the input. This query is the same as it was yesterday and the day before, and then I check if my query returns nil, and then the reason this is so obscure because I get the result in a set, in a vector, I get nil, and so this was the approach I could find to check for the nil value, that I take the first element of this, which gives me the vector, and then I take the first element of that, which gives me nil if it is nil. So this is how I check it. If there's a better solution, please let me know. And then after this, I just simply either print my table format, which is now just a very simple, ugly formatting, or I print the table itself, and again the end result is a very nicely working interactive table, which I think works really cool. So I'm pretty proud of the end result, and I can see how I can work from here. So thank you, and I hope you found this helpful and interesting.